Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to some of you and peace to the rest of you. Black Heart Sound and Black In again. Let me holler at y'all about this right quick. Boogie did a good analysis of BGS's Octane system. There are certain things that he could not include, and it's not his fault. I grew up 92 Octane, and so there are a few things I can add to it. Now, I'm not saying any of this, I'm doing an addendum. I'm not doing this as an argument, although I am going to say this. I disagree with anybody's, including Boogie's, somewhat Darwinistic approach. I'm going to get to that towards the end. This doesn't mean I hate him. It's not that, nothing like that. But I do disagree with this Darwinistic understanding that we have taken. It's not that Darwin didn't know anything at all about what he was talking about, although that nigga was a problem in and of himself. But let's go ahead and get back to the 92 Octane woman and the 92 Octane brother. The 92 Octane has everything she needs materially. So this means that a man can protect her and entertain her, as Boogie pointed out. Because he can't provide what she doesn't already have, he can only increase its quantity. I'm going somewhere with this, though. Now, Boogie mentioned that he's only explaining how women think to us and merely informing us. To a certain extent, that is true, although he does say that you can't expect them to not. He does say you have to understand you can't expect their hypergamy to never kick in and for them to just stop chasing the 6'5" jawline dude trying to screw them. I say to that, actually, we can't expect them to stop because there are those of them that like other things and they don't chase after them because their friends don't chase them. So what they're chasing after has a lot more to do with their friends and social approval than it has to do with even their own sexual desires. In that regard, yeah, our point is valid. Getting back to this, though. Black women do need protection and entertainment. And so all of us agree on that. It's not wrong. They have the right to look for these things. And even guys that are mistakenly called lames don't fault women for looking for some sort of security. There are bad things out there, and we all need protection from them, even men do. So that need is normal. But there's still something going on in Black America, though, and even the Black community of the UK to a certain extent, and that is the exaggeration of this instinct for security. You see, when you start looking for a reasonable level of safety and protection from something that's a real concern, you're normal. But when you start seeing this concern as something that's coming around the corner all the time, then you either know something others don't know or you are paranoid. It's one of those two. It's an exaggeration of this instinct, and this is due to trauma as well, and this trauma is from crackers. This exaggeration is from the dangers that we faced in previous generations in the Americas on these plantations, and especially in the U.S. from Jim Crow and lynching days, and then our own worst communities from each other. So in the end, there is something abnormal going on in our situation. So understandably, our sisters do have a reason to be more concerned with certain types of security. But we're still abnormal in this regard. We ourselves are also abnormal, and here's why. Actually, sisters are abnormal, and here's why I'm going to say it. In Brazil, Black Brazilian women don't look for the most violent men in most cases. Brazil is not a wealthy or poor country. It's in the middle. It's got poverty. Black Brazilian women are not known for looking for the worst dudes. In Black Morocco, which is not necessarily by definition poor, they can appreciate a man's ability to defend, but there's not this assumption that any but the top 20% of men are wimps or cowards. This is an assumption that exists in Black America and in the Black UK communities. That's it. And maybe some of the islands. For the most part, no. In general, no. It's not something that you see all over. You don't see a normal guy being seen as some sort of wimp or coward and just completely undeserving. What you see in our communities is that the women that actually do like a normal guy get vilified by their friends because he's normal, which means that he is a wimp, and you see the 80% are the same as the bottom 5% in our communities. That's what's going on. I can remember my ex once telling me in Morocco that she wanted me to be a lion to her brothers when I went to them to discuss marriage. And I straight told her, if they need the lion, I'm going to give them the lion. If they need the gorilla, I'm going to give them the gorilla. But if they're only looking out for your interest and they're not against me, there's nothing to argue about. If they're protecting you, I'm with them in that. We agree. She understood what I meant. She understood that I was dead set on being fair and just, and only then would I be aggressive and macho if I had to. This was understood. There was no assumption of cowardice or weakness. I can't say the same for Black America. I can't even say the same for certain Mexican communities. They've complained about the same thing happening. There's a hybristophilia, and it is a problem, and I'm not excusing that. Now, in these other nations I've mentioned, even in violent neighborhoods, the women don't compete with each other for the most violent men, the most tattooed men, the most thugged out men, and the men with the longest criminal records. You don't hear about that. When you go to these other places, the fact is that the way that Black American and Black British women act with regard to their men is seen everywhere else as being animalistic. It is not seen as being normal in any case. Insisting on a man's ability to protect is normal and understood, but insisting on his ability to protect her from very childish dangers at a childish social level that should only be present in classrooms and on playgrounds is not seen as normal. It's not normal for women to look at 80% of men and assume that the 80% are the same as the bottom 5% and then demand that they be judged by men on a more equitable distribution. And then all the women do this. Nobody would call this normal. It's normal that women even expect to find, it's actually abnormal that women even expect to find some rare 20% of men and then think they can, there's enough to go around and none of them have to share. No, they got to share. The expectations of the women in the West are worse than the actual preferences. Hell, everyone prefers something that's not realistic. We all prefer things that we don't expect and would not dare demand of God. We think about it. How great would life be if, we never went gray, didn't get old, lived a lot longer, regardless of what we ate, didn't get fat, got paid and didn't work? It'd be a paradise. The difference is that in the West, sisters demand and expect these things that don't even come together in the same man. Like the wealth of an old man and the stamina of a young man. Are you kidding me? You got to make a choice. That's it. That's all you're going to get. And then these are the expectations they make from a male gender that doesn't understand women and can't read women's minds after they unanimously and collectively lied to us about what they want in the first place. This is why I start to disagree with some of you gentlemen, including C. Boogie in this regard. Not hatred, but this is where I disagree and why I have to. See, we normal men are not sitting up saying, stop going after the 6'5" guys and come mess with us. What we're saying is, well, if that's what you want, say that that's what you want from a young age. Tell your male relatives that that's what you want. Don't lie to us, and then deal with the consequences of it. And don't come to us to bail you out. Also, don't say anything when we step out and go into another community wherein we are appreciated by those women. Don't do that. Women collectively have had trouble agreeing with each other on anything, and yet they have collectively agreed with each other to lie about what they want in the first place, even to their own male relatives. So yes, in the end, the confusion and ignorance of men, especially 92 octane men, is not men's fault, it's women's fault. I don't mean every woman, so I don't want to hear that mess. But collectively, yeah, it is theirs. And this is what needs to be addressed first. So to many of you Darwinists out there, I want you to understand that this is really the source of the frustration. Even subconsciously, a lot of guys are frustrated by that, but they can't explain it because it's subconscious. But in the Black community, the definition of a select man is abnormal anyway. So as I said, the wish for a man to be a man is normal, and the issue is when they insist that a man be an exaggeration, something other than a man. Evolution has already weeded out any genetically inferior man, if there is such a thing. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, at least, if not millions. The issue is not that we're upset that nature is how it is and we're sore losers. It's that we're lied to so that you can keep obeying negative peer group pressure from each other, even in your adult years, ladies, to win some social competition that's fit for immature children or jungle animals. The issue is that we're being lied to and expected to pay the price so that you can win a social competition that belongs to kids and a sexual competition that belongs to animals. And then expecting us to actually sit back and wait for you and your friends to bring us other men's children who don't even know they got these kids sometimes, and a host of other consequences and drawbacks because of your previous decisions, like the inability to pair bond. This is the issue here, not how sore losers normal men are in the black community. It's like Edward Anderson said, if that was the case, then we would be viewed the same by women of all communities around the world. But when black men, African and American, and when I say American, I mean also from other parts of the Americas, go around the world, women like us. And we don't have to be the silverback. We don't have to be that negative stereotype. But black men that are normal but are non-select because they're normal in the black community would then automatically be non-select in other communities too. And I just told you that that's not what's going on. I myself was shocked to find out how I was viewed in certain parts of the world. Why? Because Western sisters hid it from me so much. I mean, y'all talk about, well, you need to work on your value and your SMV was just low. No, apparently, I was tricked by Western sisters to underestimate my SMV. I was an adult with kids finding out that I've been lied to about my SMV consistently by American sisters. If I'd been willing to step out a long time ago, I would have found out. And that was only because of a phenotype that is stereotypically associated with an inability to protect, not because of a real inability to protect. That's all it was. That was it. And other brothers had to go through similar things for equally stupid and superficial reasons. I wasn't even unattracted to American sisters, so some people would try to hint that to me, well, you were just unattractive to them. I thought I was unattractive to half to a third. Turns out I wasn't. And other guys were thinking that because they wore glasses, that they were good with foreign languages, that they were actually unattractive. No, they weren't unattractive. They just were not what women wanted to show off to their friends. What I'm saying is that sisters lied to us about how they felt about us in the first doggone place because they needed a guy that could fit the negative stereotype of what a black man should be in order to win social approval from their friends. And I'm talking about 92 octanes, the way I also grew up. 92 octane. I grew up in their circles. I was that dude with whom they grew up. And I can tell you that in the end, those 92 octane girls grew up to be 92 octane women who did one thing, and that's why it is that you see them with who you saw them with. They placed their friends above their own parents and grandparents, and they chased guys who their friends wanted and their parents didn't want for them. And frankly, the competition among their age group for the girls was that you get the guys your parents don't want for you. That's all it was. That was it. There was nothing else to it. If their mothers had said that I was too bad of a guy, too rough, not high-class demeanor enough, and I was fighting too much in high school, they would have been trying to sneak into my bedroom. And it's not because 92 octane men can't protect them. It's not even because they can't figure out that we can protect them. It's because they can't convince their childish friends in a hair salon that 92 octane men can protect them. It's because they can't convince other women to associate 92 octane men with protection in the hair salon when they talking, saying, girl, you need to do X, Y, and Z. That's all it is. And because they won't think enough to realize that security is not only in an ability to repel a problem, it is also in distance from the problem, prevention of the problem. That's it. It's not just in pushing it away when it shows up. It's also in preventing it before it gets there. Being far from it. Having a head start and being away from it. This is also security, and sisters ain't thinking that way. There's a reason for that. There's one good reason and a bunch of bad ones. I'm going to get to that too. But see, let's look at the bighorn sheep, an endangered species, and I'm going to point something out. They're an endangered species partially due to habitat destruction, but now they're mostly in the Rocky Mountains, and people aren't settling right on the sides of the Rocky Mountains where they live. So them being an endangered species has to do more so with hunting, but then also because they can't replace themselves. Why is that? It's not so much the age of maturity. It's not really that, but it's because they're females, and their females are paranoid about getting with a wimp or a coward. So they want to mate with only the one male left standing after the headbutting contest. That's why. They collectively insist on mating with only the last one standing. But he also is the one that dies of brain damage. So he headbutts, he wins, he screws, he dies of brain damage. They all want the same father for their lambs, even though that's going to cause inbreeding later on. But there are some of them who sneak off and they screw the ones that aren't getting brain damage. And if it wasn't for them, all the lambs would be siblings, and then all of them would be inbred by the third generation. Sisters in the West are doing that same thing. This is not something that all women around the world are doing. There have been times when they did this during the agricultural revolution, when people were, a long time ago, when people were far less developed than what we are now. But to a certain extent, that died off. And nobody had to sit up and hold a meeting and make this decision. It stopped. So what this means is that this is not normal. Now, white women in the West are doing the same thing, but that's fine. That's good for us when they undermine themselves like that. We're just not capitalizing on that. So we're following them to our own detriment. And what's happening is that some of you guys out there, you Darwinist Negroes, are mistakenly justifying these exaggerated fears that drive this hybristophilic mating standard that belong in lower species. We might be a kind of animal, but we're not jungle animals. Do we need cowards among us? No. But we don't need the exaggerated obsession with violence either that can lead to things as stupid as suicide by somebody else. These are both extremes. If they're so normal, tell us why there are societies that don't go this far and they're still around. Tell us why it is that even in these societies that are now being affected and are developing this problem, it was only an issue after their exposure to the white Western monster. There's another thing too I want to mention, if I may. I already touched on this. I said that there's one good reason that black women in the West have some of this hybristophilia. One good reason. Hybristophilia is still not a solution, but there's one viable explanation or a normal explanation as for why they have a heightened sense of security, and that is a subconscious knowledge that we all have, although we went about the knowledge the wrong way. Western white women also have this hybristophilia, and it's also for the same reason. You see, we know a lot of things subconsciously that we don't know consciously. And one of these things that we know subconsciously that we didn't know consciously is that we were never as safe as we consciously imagined ourselves to be. It was never the case. We knew that it was nothing for the U.S. to slip right back into the days of Jim Crow and lynchings. And what are we heading towards now? Subconsciously, we knew this could happen. Subconsciously. Consciously, we didn't want to say that it would go back to this, and I know because I said it would, and I got laughed at, and I'm not going to forgive black folks for that. Not for having a different opinion, but for laughing like I was ridiculous and paranoid. Now what's happening? We were sitting ducks in the U.S. and the U.K. even after the end of Jim Crow and the violence. We just weren't seeing the violence in the 70s and 80s, that's all. But what was to stop it from coming back if white America's collective will was for it to come back? Now we've seen what's going on. 2011, that white teen in Mississippi beat and killed that black man in Jackson. He's going to prison for it. He had a black stepfather, by the way. But still, he went back to the racism from previous generations as though he was not going to go to prison. Then we saw more police getting away with shooting black men and women, and its uptick, starting with Mike Brown in Missouri. That was before Trump. We subconsciously knew that this would happen again, and for this reason, we just consciously didn't want to accept it. So I understand that sisters want to be defended, but that means you need to consciously accept that this is what your fear is. And the answer was always repatriation. I said that years ago. Said it when I was a kid. Repatriation. Niggas didn't want to hear that either. We thought of Africa like it was the Tarzan movies and other nations as still being subpar. So that's another talk for another recording. But I know that repatriation is a solution because I did it. And it is much better over here where I am. I only spent 3 weeks in the U.S. For the summer break. Just 3 weeks. I felt a sense of relief when I got back here. And the thing is, because a lot of us didn't think about repatriation as being viable, we never made any preparations. So if you had to repatriate in an emergency as a refugee, you just be somewhere else looking for a job where there might not be one, and then you got a bag. And then you become a burden to that society. But one of the things is that I was going to say is that whatever the solution is, you got to make hay while the sun shines. And we don't grasp that concept early enough in life because we go through our nigger teenage phase at the permission of our parents and act like nigga teenagers. So we don't think about the future and you got to make hay while the sun shines. Even though we understand that we can't get away with the same thing that white teens get away with, we still insist on being allowed to go through the same phase. And it does us damage even after those years are over. That's also another talk for another time. But until black folks change that culture, till we get rid of the idea of the teenage phase, I don't mean the teenage chronological years, they do exist, but until we get rid of this idea that whites have that there is a distinct teenage phase in which you're the worst of the child and the worst of an adult and the best of neither, all rolled into one. And the nigga teenage phase is that on top of it all, then we're going to stay behind because that phase is not doing us any good. It's not even helping the white community, but it's really hurting us. Until we get rid of that mindset, that means that we got to go deep in our brains and rewire some stuff. I don't care why niggas wouldn't listen when I said repatriation was a solution. I don't care why niggas wouldn't listen when I said Islam is the solution. I don't care why niggas wouldn't listen when I said there is no teenage phase, it's something that's made up, and this artificial phase of development is ruining us. I don't care what the reasons are. The fact is niggas wouldn't listen, so I left the country and I'm over here, and now I'm not going to help no nigga come over here. Now, if you were woke years ago and you just trying to get over here and just not getting your paperwork together, I don't mind helping. But if you one of them guys that went through this nigga teenage phase and you wouldn't listen back then, and I know you wouldn't listen, I'm not helping you, man or woman. But the point is that subconsciously we were aware of how precarious our safety was in the 70s and 80s. And that's why sisters never stop wanting some extra security from brothers, even though this is still exaggerated and other people have gone through similar things without going through this odd mating strategy. I'm gonna say this though. White women, and I'm not gonna lie, white women have the same problem. You see, white women know that their men are violent. And white women have, in their knowledge that their men are violent like this and that their men would do this, you may wonder why is it that they're looking at this hybristophilic mating strategy? Well, it's for one reason. See, white women know that there's supposed to be a reprisal against their community for what their men have done to everybody else and for what they themselves have done. They know what they did during slavery to a certain extent, and they know what they can do. So at the end of the day, white women are looking at the most rough, thugged out of their white men for mates to father the children. They're looking for brothers. They're looking for Latinos. They're looking for, you notice that what they're looking for is what other white men are afraid of. That's what they're looking for. They want a protection from the reprisal against their people. They either want a white guy that they feel can protect them from these niggas, or they want a nigga, not that I call us that, but in their mind, or they want a nigga. They want a jungle bunny that can protect them from white men. This is what's going through their minds. Or they want a Latino that'll shoot up anybody or stab anybody. This is what's going through their minds. It's not just that they want protection from the worst of society. No, they want it from something that is beyond. So what I'm saying is that racism and white supremacy are the reasons that Western women in general, white and black, have this hybristophilic jungle animal mating strategy. That's what's going on. And so no, it's not Darwinism. It's not natural selection like some of you brothers are doing. Some of you brothers out here justifying this stuff, saying that, well, they can't help it. They just have to go and screw the 6'5" jawline dude. How many times have you passed by a woman that could be a stripper or that is a stripper and you didn't just have to screw her and you didn't do it? So you're telling me that you can exercise self-restraint, but they can't? Is that what you're saying? Because if that's what you're saying, then that means Islam is the solution, and not just Islam, but specifically the stereotype of Islam in which the women are tightly controlled and even slapped around if they need to be. I don't believe that you got to slap women around and control them. Not most of them. Girls, maybe. Grown women, no. I don't believe that, and I've been Muslim 17 years. So my question is this what you saying? Because at the end of the day, some of you dudes out here, Darwinists, and some of you guys out here that have had women chasing after you, you still fail to understand that you are justifying things for them that they would never justify for you, even if they believed that they wouldn't justify it because their friends would get on them about it. This is because of white supremacy. It's not because of nature. White supremacy is not natural anyway. So while we're falling apart, they're killing us. And they're getting away with it through the infiltration of law enforcement. And we're sitting up here trying to use nature to justify it? No. In the midst of us being killed, among other things, our family situation is about to completely vanish because sisters are more against repatriation than brothers. Sisters are more against nature than brothers. And they're insistent on obeying the social instincts of immature children and the sexual instincts of jungle animals. Brothers, especially those of you talking about jawline and Darwinism and all that natural selection, understand that Darwin didn't use that to justify this. Darwin did not. Darwin said you have natural selection and then you have sexual selection. Natural selection determines who does not get picked off before they can have their own kids. Sexual selection determines who is attractive enough to the opposite gender of that same species to have their own kids. That's all it is. That's what he said. He never said that you have to be in the top 20% of men for height and income and social dominance in order for a regular, normal, run-of-the-mill, nothing special woman to find you attractive enough to bend over. He never said anything like that. And the last thing I'm going to say, to sisters that want to justify this stuff, I'm not talking to the straight up and down square dealing sisters, I'm not talking about that, but to sisters that want to justify this stuff, and some of you brothers that want to justify this too, understand this: it is never the job of the man to be patient so that the woman can be stupid, so that the woman can be immature, and so the woman can behave like another species. It is never the job of the woman to be patient so that a man can act like a little boy, or he can act like a jungle animal, or he can just plain flat out be stupid. It works both ways. If we are adult human beings, then we're adult human beings. And grown men only sleep with grown women, physically and psychologically. It is not your job to be a grown man and prove it only so that somebody can come along and act childish and twirl her hair around, but she got tits and ass, so you give her some ding-a-ling. That's not your job, bruh. You selling yourself short, but you saying the women don't have to. That's really all you doing. At the end of the day, you've done nothing more than this. And this is why it is that I say to you, do not sit up here and brag because you happen to win a rigged game. The game is rigged. They've admitted it. You've admitted it collectively. Instead of bragging about that, you simply say, okay, the rules were different for us than they were for them. And they weren't even equitable. And we've been selling ourselves short. And we don't have to. That's all you got to say. And when brothers from the West decide, you know what, I'm going to go over here with these sisters that are not from the West, or I'm going to go over here with these other women of color. I'm not advocating going with white women. That's a dangerous thing. But when they say they're going to go with these other melanated women that are not from the West and don't have that mindset and can treat a normal man like he is at least a normal man, and can treat a man that is her type like he is her type, if he is actually her type. In other words, not hiding the fact that they're attracted to him just because their friends aren't going to give them props for being with him. Then don't sit up and say that these men are somehow weak or losers. Because that's not what's going on. What's going on is you just got lucky enough to win an extraordinarily rigged game, and now you want to act like some other guys are abnormal because you don't think that the game is rigged. If you don't know it's rigged, that's one thing, that's fine. But you don't know if it's rigged unless you go and see how other people play it. That's all it is. Get your passport, go abroad. You may find that they have the same nature, but do they obey that nature equally? No, That's where the difference comes in. Men may have a similar nature. Do all men obey that nature equally? No, they don't. You got men in countries who, even if a stripper looks nice, they're not going to hand her money. And stripping is not a business in those countries, at least not an open legal business, because the society don't allow it, and that's not how these men are oriented. There are nations like that. And then you got nations that are different. You got nations where they're really sexually lax. But that's also because they don't care if a married man leaves his house and goes and gets with a stripper and pays her a little money, digs her guts out, goes back home to his wife, and doesn't screw her. So you got different men who, for cultural and societal reasons and moral reasons, deal with their human nature differently. And there are ways in which it really works. Like where I'm living right now, once people are married and they're not plagued with debt, which is a rare case. The marriage is common, but the debt is very common too. But once they're married and they're not plagued with debt, I'd say they tend to deal with it pretty well. Marriage is a matter of public record. Sex, though, that's private. And that's between the husband and the wife. So everybody understands that they're supposed to be screwing, but when they screw and how they screw ain't your business unless you're one of those two, unless you're in that marriage. Your business is how and when you screw your spouse, but you better screw your spouse and not someone else. I'd say that they generally deal with that after marriage pretty well. Now, before they get married, that's a different story. That's where it comes down to the individual. But at the end of the day, they got a way to deal with it, and there's no idea that you're less of a man because you dealt with it according to the law and according to the religion. If you only sleep with your wife for your whole life, you are not any less of a man for it. They don't see it that way. That is not, they don't have that idea. No man, no woman has that idea. I knew a dude, y'all would have said, oh yeah, he's a jawline brother. I knew a guy like that, Saudi cat. We still cool. Lives up in the north, about 40 miles from the Iraqi border. This man has only been with one woman his whole life. He married his current wife. He was 19 when they got married. So when they got married, that was it. That's the only woman he'd been with his whole life. He hadn't shaken hands with other women unless they were related to him. He hadn't looked at them. He hasn't looked at their hair unless they were related to him or his wife. He ain't been with nobody else, and nobody around here ever asked him, man, don't you get tired of the same old woman? It's not an idea here. You got tired of the same woman. No, now, you may have enough energy for more than one and enough resources for more than one, but there's no idea here that you got tired of the same one. What really happens is some men just get tired of women's foolishness, and that's when they dump and divorce them. That's the idea here. Or some men know that women are going to get tired of them. That's really what it comes down to here where we are. So at the end of the day, this is not really about the 92 octanes. It's actually about this fake understanding of, or this erroneous understanding of Darwinism that we have. And it's also about why the 92 octane are going, the real reason that they're going after these other guys. Yes, it is true that the protection has something to do with it. That is true. But the major thing is that the parents have been weakened in influence, and the friends have been strengthened in influence. And the real protection that they're looking for is not a protection from a physical threat. It is a protection from a social ostracism. That's all it is. In other words, it's just negative peer pressure. And they don't want to be socially ostracized because they got with a 92 octane dude. Some would say, well, yeah, but the reason why there's this pressure is because the 92 octane can't protect them. Who said that? Stereotype says that, yeah. But that's not really what it is. It's just the negative peer pressure. And that's not something for which we are required to forgive an adult woman, obeying negative peer group pressure. There is peer group pressure at all ages, but when it's negative, we are not required to forgive even a teenager for obeying it. Why should we be required to forgive an adult woman for obeying that when we can't obey it? What's going on with that? You see? That's where the issue comes in. Like I said, at the crux of it all, 92 octane, any octane, or this idea we have of Darwinism that he didn't even put out there. At the end of the day, it simply boils down to the fact that we are not required to be patient with them and relax standards for them that they will not be patient with for us, and to which they hold us to the highest standard within those standards. We are not required to be easier for them than they are for us. End of story. That's all it is. And that's all we saying. And we're not required to sit there and wait on the most strict judges of them, or the most difficult of the female species, i.e. the black Western woman, or the white Western woman for that matter. We're not required to sit back and wait for them to grow the F up if we have to grow up in our teens and they get to sit up here and remain children in their mating selection strategies and selection criteria all the way up into their 30s and 40s. We're not required to sit back and wait until they can't have babies anymore, until they're not even attractive anymore, and can't pair bond with a man anymore, for them to decide that they're going to come around and give us a shot, when all they're going to do is decide to divorce rape us anyway, if that is the case. We're not required to settle for what the F is out there unless they were required to settle for the same low things from us, and they're not. At the end of the day, it still comes down to the fact that whether you want to believe it or not, the game is rigged. You just didn't know it because you were whatever your height is and jawline and got some money and some muscles, and these women just didn't peg you as a guy to get out there and take things from except the ding-a-ling. At the end of the day, they're coming to you for the ding-a-ling because the pussy price has been paid for by other men. If it wasn't, they would be coming to you for the pussy price, and your view would be a whole lot different. You wouldn't be talking about Darwinism at that point. You would be calling these women materialistic bees and hoes. That's what you would be doing. They come to you for resources that you don't have to pay for that punani that they otherwise actually do want to give you. No, what they're doing is they're going after other guys for the resources to give you the punani. But if they were coming to you for the price that they actually want for that vagina, you would be looking and saying, yeah, man, you know, they want too much. And that's what you would be talking about. And you'd be right there along with us. That's real. I know that because just like they've told you this sometimes, they've told me this at times. I've had dudes explain to me what's going on, although they didn't know what they were explaining. And I've had some of these women explain to me what was going on. And by the way, I want to give a shout out and a warning to somebody in Louisiana named Tim Douglas. He lives in South Louisiana, last I heard. You and I have a mutual friend, first initial K, last name Johnson. You know who I'm talking about. She told, in case, if you know Tim Douglas in either the Denham Springs, the Baton Rouge, Port Allen, or Lafayette areas, or from there, and if you know him and you can find him, put this out there for him. Say, Brother Douglas, I'm not giving his whole first name. I'm not going to do that, but because if you don't know him, you can't find him. But if you do know him, you know who he is. So his privacy will remain intact from people that don't know him. But if you know him, then you can find him. Don't go tell anybody else. Go to him and tell him that somebody he knew growing up for a little while, he'll know the voice he'll know my voice if you let him hear this. Bruh, I'm gonna let you know right now. I don't know if you're still married to the lady that had a kid before she met you. I'm not sure. In about 1998, I think you were married to her. She had a kid before she met you. Our friend, our mutual friend, first initial K, last name Johnson, told me that this lady, she knew her, and that this lady would not have married you if she had not already had another man's child to begin with. That there's no way she would have let a man like you father her first child because she didn't see you as equal to other men. She saw you as a beta provider simp. And this is before these words were out there like that. But that's how she saw you. And this friend, a mutual friend of ours, told me this. And I couldn't reach you to tell you that. I couldn't find you. I wanted you to know this, bro. If you're still married to her, I suggest she get out there and work on a real. If you're still married to her, what I suggest is you take a job where you just ain't making nothing. She either gets out there and works, or she divorces you and you only owe alimony based on what your income is at that time. Then afterwards, you go back to doing whatever you're doing. If she's not working. If she is working, you divorce her straight away. Just, you know what, fit the guck out. Why? Because I know from your friend that the only reason you wanted me to begin with is because you already had somebody else's child and you wanted a nice guy like me to raise the baby, and I wasn't really your type. Let's just call it what it is. You kick her the F out. You marry someone that's not bringing you none of that drama. And that's real. You marry someone that's coming to you equally yoked, so to speak. Because on the real, bro, this is not fair to you, man. And she told me this over 20 years ago, and I just never could find you to tell you this. So, I wanted you to know this, man. It's not fair. Not to you. But this was back in the 90s when we didn't know the stuff that we know now. So, Brother Douglas, kick her to the curb. That's real. Unless she'll let you stay home and eat her food and drive her car around while she gets out there and works and takes care of you and lets you be trifling for a little bit. Now, she'll tolerate that and take care of you. Go ahead, bro. I say get milk it for all it's worth and screw somebody else if your beliefs will allow it. They probably won't. If not, then you make her think you screwing somebody else and you still tap that when you want it. But bruh, you got taken advantage of. You got taken advantage of in a way you don't deserve, you never earned. And I hate the fact that for 20 years I never could find you. Still can't. Now 22 years. And then I got to resort to this to let you know what's going on. But this is the practical application of what I've been saying in the previous videos. I want these brothers who were in these situations and didn't know what was going on to know what's going on. Look at that woman and say, you know what? The game has changed. The rules have changed. Now in exchange for what I'm doing, I want X, Y, and Z. You bend over and provide it, or you bend over and pack your bags and fit the guck out. And don't ask me for no alimony either. Straight like that. That's what I want to see happen. Not just for Mr. Douglas. I want all of you. If you know someone that's going through this and you can find them, go ahead and pull their coattail and say, hey man, drop a dime on that B and tell them what she's doing to him. And just be like, straight like this, bro. If you can't do the same thing to her, bounce. Replace her. This is the practical application. Because truth be told, some of you cats are talking about, well, the game's been fine to me. Yeah, I'm glad it has been, but that's because the price was paid. Now, we got to understand that regular, normal men, now we ain't talking about lames and bookish guys. We ain't talking about Steve Urkel. That's a rare anomaly. It's very rare. We talking about regular, normal, run-of-the-mill guys. They just might wear glasses or something. Normal, run-of-the-mill guys, them dudes, stop paying the punani price, straight up. Just don't pay it. And what is the punani price? You're not related to her, but you're paying her non-sexual attention. That's the punani price. You're paying a price so they can give the punani to somebody else. That's what's going on. So I say cut it out and let them know. Nope, I'm not disrespectful. I'm not mean to you, but I'm not your type anyway. So I'm out, or you're out. And what happens when enough of us start doing this? Well, some of you cats talking about Darwinism, you're going to understand how unnatural it really was. Believe that. Because when you start trying to go into other communities and you start trying this stuff, you're going to see the women, you'll notice the women from those communities that would give you a chance versus the ones that would not give you the chance. You'll see what the difference is. And you'll understand what we were talking about. I hope this has been a benefit. Blackheart, sign of blackout. Assalamu alaikum.